Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of chasingpokergreatness.com. And today is Friday, a very philosophical day. So I am joined by Duncan Palamourdas, my co-host for Philosophical Friday. How you doing, my friend?
Good. Today I noticed I don't look like a cyborg, so I selectively chose a dark shirt, so you cannot see my cable, or maybe you can if you look really closely. So no more cyborg Duncan. How are you,
No
sir?
more. I'm doing quite well. I've got no complaints. Summertime, weather's cooling off a little bit, which is really nice. Just got back from a wolf retreat that we'll go into depth about on Tactical Tuesday. John has lots of questions because he was not there for some ungodly reason. But yeah, it was coming off of like a 4 or 5 day trip, hanging out with seven or eight wolves in a cabin and just playing poker, talking, getting to know each other better, all the fellowship, bonding, just really, really awesome time.
That's awesome. And for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, today Brad decided to do his best impersonation of Doug Polk. He's rocking this sleeveless shirt.
Mm.
So I'm
Well,
painting a picture for the listener too.
yeah. This tank top, wearing it, it's the first time that comparison has been made.
I don't think I've ever seen you like with a tank top before. So like I just have to make fun of you. I just can't help it.
Yeah, I wore it to like wolf group coaching. I've worn it to one-to-one coaching sessions, and every time it's
Awesome.
the same Doug Polk impersonation. That guy, he's apparently trademarked the tank tops somewhere along the way without me being aware.
It's you and Phil Hellmuth from 2001 or whatever it was when he was being Caesar. So
there you go. Well, what's on the docket today?
I'm really excited today. I've been waiting for this day the whole my life, because it's going to be an excellent opportunity for me to learn more about spirituality. We teased the audience last week. So today we decided, let's go dig in and try to see if we can learn more about the topic of spirituality in general. So I'm hoping to get some answers to some of the questions, in the next 30, 40 minutes, things that people have been trying to answer for thousands of years, but who cares?
Yeah, we figured we got an hour, so we'll just solve this and then move on to something less tricky, like bankroll management or something next week.
Exactly correct. So why don't we start, simple, right? So what is spirituality? And a lot of people can define it in different ways, but in your own mind, when somebody mentions the word spirituality, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, I think we have to like go back a little bit more to just the spirit, right? So
Okay.
before spirituality, there is the spirit, and like so, my personal belief system of spirit, I would believe like the analog is consciousness to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the ego, your consciousness, this feeling of you just experiencing the universe and the world in your own very specific way. So like spirit to me is consciousness, and those two are like basically interchangeable.
Mm-hmm. So this is something very concrete and at the same time really vague in some sense, because consciousness is one of the very difficult unresolved issues, right? I mean, what is consciousness and where is it derived? And there's
consciousness for me is awareness. Like it's just when you say like my arm hurts, it's like who's the my in that statement? That the my to me is the consciousness, the awareness that we are. Like whatever like we or Brad or I is just being aware of the inputs and my surroundings.
Let me ask you this, because I always wanted to discuss this with somebody. Do you think like rocks have any form of awareness, like like beings that we wouldn't call sentient, like for example rocks or mountains or the water? Is there like any By the way, incidentally, for the listener, this is a philosophical movement which is called panpsychism. The idea that there are levels of consciousness in basically every material. But
I would agree with that. That
you would agree with that, okay?
I mean, because I mean, to me, it must be because this planet was a rock,
Mm-hmm.
and life sprang from a rock.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if consciousness sprang from that, then there must be some level of consciousness in rocks and mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Or it probably that's like it's more the atoms that make up
Sure.
the
Yeah. No,
rock or the
absolutely.
mountain.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you're basically saying that it's in some sense, it's turtles all the way down. So, like, I mean, that consciousness must have come from somewhere. It didn't come, randomly. It just has to come from the material that we're composed of.
Yeah, the material that the Earth is composed of, right?
Right.
That we have
Mm-hmm.
access to. Else, how did we get consciousness, right?
Right.
If it doesn't come from that, then is it just like a magic trick?
Well,
that doesn't make sense.
I'm sure there's many religious people who are gonna jump into give you a
Sure,
quick
sure.
answer there.
Yeah,
But
and to me, like I want to root as much as I possibly can in
mm-hmm.
logic and
Mm-hmm.
things that are not faith based,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where, like, yeah, I mean that's a whole different discussion about faith, and that's something I don't really want to touch, because like
Absolutely,
it's hard to have a solid answer or discussion when it's faith based, because like I don't believe and you believe,
mm-hmm.
and that's where we're at.
That's exactly
that's
right.
where we're gonna end.
And there's another issue too, and incidentally, I mean, I'm going to take like all of the sides of the argument. I mean, I'm taking the other side of the argument,
sure,
because I'm trying to be fair to religious people. But I've mentioned that before, that there's a bigger issue. It's not just about believing and not believing. It's also an issue of something not making sense. Like, for example, people often think that there's two types of people: the theists and the atheists. I would say there's a third type: those who don't understand either of those things, those who don't understand the question itself, right? I mean, I fall myself
agnostic.
in the not agnostic.
Not agnostic.
No, the agnostic is different. The agnostic says, I don't know. I understand the question, and I don't know if it's the answer is positive or negative. There's people who don't understand the question, like myself. I don't understand what the question "Does God exist?" mean. I don't understand it. Like it's like.
What do you mean by that? Why don't you understand it?
Because I don't understand what it means. Like, what is it that you're asking me if God exists? Like, you can't even describe it to me in a way that I can actually possibly give a positive or a negative answer. So I am like, my ignorance is to the point where I don't even understand the question to possibly not if I cannot be agnostic, right? Because an agnostic would say, I understand the question, but I'm not sure if the answer is yes or no. What I'm saying is that I don't understand the question. I legitimately don't understand. I've tried a long time.
What's the sticking point, I guess? So like, why don't you understand the question?
Because in order for the question for me to be proper, well defined, I need to have a clear definition that makes sense to me. So when somebody says
what God is,
exactly, this is incredibly important, like incredibly important. So when people give like metaphors and things which are not consistent with one another, I'm lost. Right. So at that point, I'm saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Like sometimes people say God is with you. So am I a God? Duncan the God? Like, is God, the Big Bang is a God? Like, what is exactly? And then there's all sorts of contradictions. So there is, I'm just like to, be fair here and take all of these sides. But I do, to go back to the, because I don't want to get sidetracked here. There is a specific, portion of people, the religious people, who would think that consciousness came suddenly, and this is another side of the argument that we have to take seriously, because again, there's people who
came suddenly.
So people will tell you that consciousness was. I mean, again, I'm not a religious expert, or
sure.
but people will basically, the basic argument is that at some point, like a discontinuous function, mathematicians will call that. So at some point, suddenly, consciousness was instilled into what we call sentient beings. And like by what they would call God, and I don't understand what that means, but
in that case, what God would be pure consciousness, right?
Perhaps, yeah, that would be one of the possible. I mean, it could be incredibly complicated. Like, I mean, it could be
Sure.
more than that, it could be less than that, it could be just that. But there is so the reason why I'm asking all these questions is because I want to understand if, in your sense, consciousness is something which is like follows a continuum versus something which is more discrete. Like, at one point it doesn't exist, and at some point all of a sudden it exists. And by the way, philosophically, there's several different movements on that. So you're more on the panpsychism kind of camp, like, it's more like on a continuum versus suddenly.
Yeah, I mean, I think continuum makes sense, and
Mm-hmm.
also it kind of like ramps up, right? Like given the complexity of the being or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. Like I think that when you're a kid, you have consciousness, but you don't create memories so
Mm-hmm.
much. And so like as you get older, you become like more and more online, more and more aware. I believe that animals have consciousness. I
Mm-hmm.
believe they have an awareness. They're aware of who they trust and who they don't trust. They're aware of just a bunch of different things. So like I think that like trees have consciousness. Like I think trees will battle for sunlight, and like you can go to a forest and see that like a couple of trees that are much bigger than one tree, that tree will like bend itself so that it can get a source of energy and food, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
to me is like something's happening there. I don't know if it's like actual thought that the tree has, or if it's just genetic code and biology that's helping the tree survive. But I think that like there is an awareness. There must be an awareness. If there wasn't an awareness, then it would just grow straight up and shrivel and die,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
No, this is great. And do you think there is so consciousness, we understand it as awareness, and everybody understands it differently, and that's what creates a pretty
Sure.
interesting dynamic. But do you think there is, when we say spirituality, there is anything beyond consciousness? When people talk about the soul, for example, or when they talk about harmony, or they talk about different concepts or imagination or anything like that, or would you say that all of these concepts I just mentioned, and then perhaps others that I forgot, they fall under the umbrella of consciousness?
To me, they all fall under the umbrella of consciousness. Like
Okay.
they're all overlapped and just stuck in there.
Okay. Basically, what we understand. Yes. So, uh, in in what way would you say that spirituality and train, is there any way for us to get closer to that awareness? How can somebody accentuate, if you will, their senses or their inner awareness so they can become more aware? And why? Let's start with that. Is it useful to be more aware? Let's start with that. Is it useful to be more aware than less aware, and why?
I think useful, yes. And I think that it's provable
Mm-hmm.
scientifically.
Okay.
The way that you become more aware is through like generally meditation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the practice of building awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and the health benefits of meditation are quantifiable, and the list is quite long at this stage as it relates to just a number of different things. So I think that like being aware is definitely has benefits. I mean, that's like what focus is. I mean, focus is just placing your awareness on a specific task and then executing.
Excellent. And before we go into meditation and the ways we can increase awareness, is increased awareness always positive, or there are situations where it could potentially be negative?
Well, are you thinking of anything specific here? Because I can't
Yeah. So
really.
so there is basically Nietzsche's criticism, right? That essentially says that to not every knowledge is not, I guess he's talking about knowledge particularly, and then we have to perhaps distinguish between the notion of knowledge and awareness.
Mhm.
But a specific type of knowledge could be hurtful for certain individuals, and one example of that would be for example, the discovery of the atomic bomb, right? So certain civilizations may not be ready to handle certain type of knowledge. So or incredible pain, or the classic example, if you knew when you were going to die, would you want to know that information? Would you want to be aware of it in some sense? And perhaps we can you can make distinctions, and you can go wherever you want with this. But that's what I'm having in mind. Is awareness always a positive thing?
I think it's subjective. So I think that it could both be positive or negative based on the human being that's experiencing it, right? And their how they experience it. Like I think that, outside of like the atomic bomb, a more personal route would be like nihilism. It's like you just, as you gain awareness and you realize that life is a temporary experience. Why is anything worth doing? Right. Why should we get out of bed in the morning? What's the point? What's the purpose?
Can I get into a philosophical tangent here?
Sure.
Because you just mentioned one of my favorite philosophical topics, right? Is nihilism intrinsically negative?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. What do you think?
It's an interesting question. I actually, I'm very skeptical with anything that takes a universal property. Anything that is always or never, I'm very skeptical about. One thing that I've noticed about nihilism in particular, I don't aspire to nihilism. I think there's for my personal life, there's better approaches to take. But one thing about nihilism that I've realized, it's not refutable. It's not philosophically refutable. You cannot just go to say, oh, you know what, here's an example where nihilism doesn't work philosophically. There's no way to refute it. And this is something that troubled, I think, a lot of philosophers. We have no way to prove that there is some sort of like a universal meaning in the world, right? So the world could very well be the same and have no meaning whatsoever. Like if somebody told us tomorrow, you know what, there is this like complete crazy person who created this world, and this world has absolutely no meaning whatsoever. He created it as a joke, or we are like inside a video game or something like that. We could still see the same world that we do. Conversely, if somebody told you, there is this incredible sophistication behind this world and this incredibly important reason why this world exists, we can still exist without issue. So there is, it's the world that we live in is compatible with and without nihilism. So in that sense, I don't think it's refutable in any way. Whether or not it's useful, I would say it depends on the actual individual. And I think a lot of the stuff that we say depend on the actual individual. So that the phrase, it depends, I think is fundamental in a lot of our conversations. And part of the reason of, we can see I'm very critical when people have universal ideas. Like I posted on Twitter, if I can do it, you can do it. Do you think it's mostly true or mostly false? Like, if I can do it, you can do it. And you probably know what my answer would be, right? If I can do it, you can do it. If somebody says that to me, what do you think I would answer? Is it mostly true or mostly false?
I'm not sure. We'll say mostly false.
Yes, exactly. Because again, I think different people are different, right? And we can't have universal truths. Like universal truths are very suspect for me. So because you asked me about nihilism. So somebody who says nihilism is bad, it would be a universal truth. And I don't see any, I haven't seen a single universal truth in my almost 40 years of life. So
I have my theory about the meaning of life and nihilism. I was just having a conversation about this yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind. I think the purpose of life is to live. I think that if you look at the universe and the makeup of the ingredients, the matter, that what you find is a lot of commonalities. There's a podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sam Harris that I listened to 6 months or so ago, where they get into like, the ingredients for life, like the three ingredients for life are like 3 of the top 5 most common resources in the entire universe, meaning very, very, very plentiful. Right. And
that's Neil deGrasse Tyson. He has repeated that argument over and over again. Yeah, he has his signature.
So to me, like the point of life is to live, in that this planet is ripe for life, clearly, and life has grown. And I think that life grows on other planets too, because it must. I just can't. It just doesn't mathematically make sense to me that one out of like, I think it's like a sextillion or something planets in the universe. It's like just a number that you can't even like fathom, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
only one would support life, or when all the ingredients are everywhere, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, like the universe, for whatever reason and whatever life is, it seems to be pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
And we think about our own lives through this consciousness experience, right? I think like, oh man, I'm gonna die, right? Like, oh, that's not good, not fun. But then I think about like, in a broad sense, I've already been dead,
Mm-hmm.
as have you.
Mm-hmm.
If death is just not existing,
Mm-hmm.
well, in 1982, I
Mm-hmm.
was dead, not alive. So like I've experienced that a lot more than I've experienced actually being alive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or maybe I haven't experienced it, but
Mm-hmm.
either way, we know what that, we have a good feeling of what that's going to look like because we've already been there. And so when I die, though, what I think is like, what makes me me, right? It's like consciousness and this experience of living, and in that way, like life goes on no matter what happens. Inevitably, life continues going on. So like I'm just one person with one set of sensory organs that experiences life, but there's going to be other, humans that go on until the sun blows up. In which case, on other planets, there's going to be other sentient beings where
Mm-hmm.
life just continues going on. And so, whatever experience I'm living through right now is just life, and life will continue going on. And so, in that way, like to me, the point of life is to live. And when I die, that's okay because what I am is life, and other sentient beings are going to continue to live. So, it's not
Mm-hmm.
like everything ends, right?
Let me ask you something. I mean, there's a lot of questions that I want to ask you, but I'm not going to go into the anthropic principle. I'm not going to go to the fact that, the
Sure.
fact that the trajectory of life that we have might be even more rare than the fact that there is life. I'm not going to go into there at all. But let me ask you a specific question to your last point. Do you think the point of life is to live, or do you think the point of life is to live as Brad Wilson?
Um, I mean, what is Brad Wilson, right? Like that's a
Yeah,
random label that my parents gave to me when I
or
had no
like
choice, right?
I can rephrase it again. Obviously, I
Sure.
mean, this is a difficult question to phrase properly,
Let
right?
well,
But
let me
what?
answer it. I think I can answer it
Okay.
appropriately. Like to live life in the way that my spirit wants me to live.
Mm-hmm.
Like that to me is like the point. Not Brad Wilson. It's just my consciousness. Like when I think of spirituality, I think of awareness, and like what makes my awareness feel good and joy and happy, and like what makes those emotions manifest.
Right.
And that to me is like that's the point, to live a life that's makes my consciousness, my awareness, my spirit happy.
Very, very good. And the reason why I'm asking you is because uh, the moment you can replace your name Brad Wilson with just the you. Like, do you want to live life, or do you want to live life as you, as yourself? And the reason why I'm doing this is because I wanna understand if you think there's like some sort of like a universal way, or it is meaning is different from individual to individual, right? That's where I was going with this.
Yeah, and we could go back to last week, right? We talked
Mm-hmm.
about the ship of Theseus.
Right.
Well, over time, I shed skin cells. Over like every 10 years, my bones are different. Like we shed our
Right.
bones and regrow them like every 10 years. So like in a lot of ways, while my consciousness, my awareness is the same, I have very few parts remaining of the me that was 20 years old,
I see.
right?
So
So
if
it's like, yeah.
no, just to clarify your point, if I understand your point correctly, you're saying not only meaning is not universal, but meaning is not even consistent among a single individual. So not only meaning is not
Yeah.
universal among different individuals, it's not even consistent within a single individual. It changes all the time as we change cells.
As we change, well, as we I guess my point was like my awareness is the same.
Mm-hmm.
My consciousness um is somewhat stable, but then my hair grows, I cut it. My skin cells flake off. Just my bones flake off and regrow. So like 10 years from now, I'm going to have very few of the same cells that I have today.
Mm-hmm.
It like in my body. Yet my awareness will be somewhat similar. So that to me is like that's a good approximation of like how I think of myself, is like just whatever the ship of Theseus, right? The
Sure,
spirit, the
sure. I love it.
spirit of the ship of Theseus is the thing that is constant, and everything else is fluid.
Absolutely. And would you say that that consciousness, which I'm assuming it relies on something, right? It comes from somewhere. Whether that something is materialistic or not, it's a different question. But would you say that the thing that holds your consciousness, do you think that that thing stays the same, changes? And also a follow-up question, would you say that your consciousness as a result remains the same or changes?
I don't know. I can't. I don't have.
How
I
do you
can't
how do
really.
you feel it personally? Like, do you think that, in other words, do you think that your consciousness is something that some people, for example, when they're talking about the soul, they think of the soul as something that is
Immutable.
immutable? Correct, exactly. Whereas they will say that even though our cells keep changing, our soul will remain the same. There's something sort of like fundamental that makes you you. Or would you say that these pieces that make you you, those change themselves, and as a result your whole consciousness changes?
I so I don't think it's immutable, because that relies on no contrary examples. I would say that I mean, I would say that it changes, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know like the significance of the change. I don't know how much it can change. Like for instance, I don't think I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be a serial killer, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that
There's a degree to that change. I understand.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
degree to that, right? Like I
Absolutely.
think that, but as a kid, I just maybe it's related to genetics, and like that's another like probably big piece of the puzzle is genetics, and like just the path that my genes have traveled over time to like land me here. But I don't know. I mean, I've always felt like a fairly compassionate person.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like a love towards other sentient creatures, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be animals or bugs or whatever it is. Like I just, I guess my genes, my spirit, whichever one like is in at the wheel, tends to value life.
Right.
Like I think that is really true for me. Um,
Absolutely. And to be fair, even when we change our cells in our body, it's not like the new cells that we get are completely different than the ones
sure,
before, right? I
sure,
mean,
sure. They're
there
quite
is some,
similar, right?
right. I
Yeah.
mean, we have like a certain type of complexity. I mean, we have a certain amount,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
characteristics. Yeah.
I don't think it is immutable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it can be I think that it can certainly be warped by life experience. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think that people who go through significant trauma, um, that can have a profound effect on the consciousness, on their spirit, that leaves them as something that is an entity that is totally different than what it started.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it can definitely be warped. It can definitely be changed, in my opinion. But I do think it's like pretty consistently there
Mm-hmm.
throughout the course of life.
Absolutely. And, like at the cost of, like the listener throwing, their phone on the wall or just screaming, I'm going to have to ask you the $1,000,000 question.
Mhm.
Would you say that consciousness is part of your cells, or would you say that it's something that is above and beyond your cells, like your material self?
I have no idea.
And nobody does, to be fair. That's why I'm saying they're gonna
Yeah,
start throwing like
yeah.
Duncan, who
I
like
can't.
you're a little bit too curious.
Yeah,
But how do you feel it?
I have no earthly idea, right? And in that way, like to me, it would almost certainly be a part of your cells.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the only thing that makes sense to me, because as I mentioned before, I believe that like cats and dogs have consciousness as well, and
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
so the alternative is some sort of like mystical consciousness infusion, which, who am I to say like what a mystical consciousness infusion, I mean, is
Absolutely.
real or not real, or exists or doesn't exist, because I mean, there's so many other like mysteries to life that like it could be scientific and be there, and we just have no awareness of it, right? So like, but to me, it would probably be a part of your cells, maybe your brain.
Mm-hmm.
um it's weird, right? Because like
Sure.
I think about like if I amputate all of my limbs, right? Well, I'm still going to be conscious, and I'm probably not going to be like any more or less conscious than I am right now. I'm just without those cells.
Mm-hmm.
So like, anyway, that I think that if they are in us, they're probably in our heads. Like they're
Absolutely.
probably in the brain. Yeah.
No. And you're actually like, I mean, obviously, for the listener, we are obviously at the limit of our understanding, and we have been at the limit of our understanding since the beginning of the conversation and before the beginning of the conversation. But as we're talking about all these things, there are some interesting things. Like, for example, you say if we cut our arms, what I'm hearing is that the brain and the heart perhaps play a more important role than our fingers. And that's I mean, I'm not a doctor, but scientifically, proven, right? I mean, it's not
Yeah,
rocket science, right?
let's
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
Let's take two people, cut one finger off, and cut out another one's heart, and see who performs better.
Exactly. We've seen, we have a little bit of a data
Yeah.
point there, right?
Uh-huh.
So interesting. And so let's go back to the thing that you mentioned earlier, right? Which I'm incredibly interested in, meditation.
Hmm.
So, Sam Harris is really big on meditation. And, for those of you who don't know, he's deeply non-religious. So he's actually, draws a line between the concept of spirituality and awareness and the other stuff. So talk us a little bit about what is meditation, and how does it help increase awareness?
I mean, so I just imagine like focus and awareness as a muscle
Mm-hmm.
that we can strengthen or that can atrophy.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who has ADHD, prone to daydreaming, prone to not being present, I tend to struggle with focus and being present. So like meditation is just it's just practicing um, having awareness on what's going on in your body, feeling your breath again and again. And whenever you kind of zone out and start daydreaming, you just bring the focus back to your breath in your body, and that's a rep. Like that's a rep that is basically strengthening your ability to be aware of what's happening internally, right? Which that awareness of what's happening internally can help you in a number of situations that I alluded to earlier. But I mean, a very practical example is like social situations, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like if you are aware that you're agitated and you're feeling angry, then maybe that awareness and will give you the ability to not lash out at
Mm-hmm.
somebody for um, a very small reason, right? And reduce conflict. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's like an awareness that you're in a bad mood, and being like, oh, I'm in a bad mood. So like take that data point into consideration when somebody says something and I feel annoyed. Like maybe it wasn't them that annoyed me. Maybe it was just that I'm in a bad mood and prone to annoyance right now. So I mean, it just gives you more data points as to how you're feeling and
Mm-hmm.
how your emotions are influencing your life experience.
Right. And is this like a completely mental process, or is it also physical? And I can be a little bit more specific. Like Andrew Huberman comes to mind, the Stanford professor who talks a lot about the brain, who says that he's of the opinion that you cannot control the mind with the mind. And what he's basically saying about that is that there are specific physical processes that we can use to essentially to hijack what the mind is doing. And because when the mind is set into a specific direction, it's very difficult to change it by the mind, because it has already decided it's going to go left. So we cannot decide to go right when the mind itself has decided to go left. So this is where I'm going with this question. So, is it possible to control the mind with the mind? And if not, what is it exactly that meditation doing to be able to make that control?
Is it possible to control the mind with the mind? I mean, is there like any contrary example that you can you could possibly think of? Because that's kind of a,
Addiction,
it's
maybe. Like like can we stop addiction by just willing it?
mhm,
I'm gonna say I'm gonna stop being an addict right now. Like
right.
I'm gonna, I don't know, like I'm going all in with 7 deuce. I'm like tilting out of my ass, and then say, what, I'm gonna stop tilting right now because I'm gonna control my
Yeah,
mind.
I don't really understand that thought because, you know,
You don't have to agree with it. I mean, just a
yeah, yeah.
question, right?
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
well, I don't, I don't agree with it, but I don't agree with it to like an extreme level that makes me feel like I'm missing something.
Okay.
Like, because, you know, you can feel like your mind can tell you that you don't want to go to the gym,
Mm-hmm.
and you can go,
Right.
right?
But your mind hasn't decided yet, I'm not going to go, right? You are in the process of, oh, I'm getting ready to be angry right now, but I'm going to decide to not go, to not become angry, right? I mean, there's something to be said about what part of the process you haven't made the decision just yet.
Hmm.
Right. Like, and it's, and again, I mean, we're
Well,
getting
I mean,
into,
so yeah, so it's basically like if you don't do something, then you couldn't have made yourself do something because it's what
sure.
you did, right?
R-
Which to
r-
me
r-
is like just semantic and doesn't really. I don't. I
No,
guess
no.
that.
The difference is, I guess, where I should be a little bit more specific. There's a difference between being angry and then saying to yourself, "Holy smoke! I mean, how did I get angry? I didn't even realize. I wasn't even aware of the moment that I became angry. Angry.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
what? And then there's a situation. Oh, this what's happening right now starts to aggravate me so much. I should better walk out that door before it gets worse, right? So on the one hand, you have the person who's like, the time is 12:03, and then before you know it, time is 12:05, and then there's like basically they were unconscious for those 2 minutes, and they're angry at 12:05, and then there's the person who's very much aware at 12:03. They're also very much aware at 12:04 when there is a transition between being being calm and being angry, and that person could potentially have some control over their actions potentially.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, like awareness is not control. Like it's not like you take a bad beat when you're playing poker and you're angry and you can just like switch the anger off. You feel it, you're
Mm-hmm.
aware of it, and that awareness, that confrontation, that acceptance
Mm-hmm.
generally leads to faster recovery
Mm-hmm.
from the situation.
So
And
awareness leads to acceptance, basically. It's if
yeah,
you
like
okay.
the something that I said a lot during the elite program is like the only way out of an emotion is through. You
Mm-hmm.
have to feel it. You
Absolutely.
can't just bury it, and you can't deceive yourself into believing that you don't feel anything, which is something that I see all the time. Is that self deception? So like to me, it's you have to feel it, but you're not necessarily controlling how you feel it. But by the nature of being aware of it, um, then it gives you a target to shoot at, right? It's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I am angry. And then you allow yourself, your central nervous system, to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually it fades away. And I think the trick is that when you have low awareness, we call it stewing, right? In our
Mm-hmm.
anger, we're seething,
Right.
we're angry, and then we have a circular thought in our heads that triggers the anger again and again and again, and we're not ever really confronting it. We're not ever allowing ourselves to just feel angry and then kind of moving on. So, I mean, in that sense, like the brain can certainly trigger more emotions. And I think this is like anxiety, worry, anger, jealousy. Like, I think that this is kind of shown again and again and again, and makes sense in our own anecdotal life experience that, like, yeah, having high or low awareness can certainly trigger more emotions and make them
Absolutely.
last way longer than they otherwise would have.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost tautological to say that if we have no self awareness, there's absolutely nothing we can do to change anything because we don't understand it's even happening when
Sure,
it's
like
happening, right? Yeah.
it just doing whatever it does.
Exactly. And but then there is a second question, and I keep coming back to that point because I think it could be potentially helpful for the listener. So if we are aware, is there something physical that also needs to be into the equation, or is it just all, like we're going to sit into our workstation, or our brain workstation, and we're going to just make the right decision?
What do you mean by physical?
Like, for instance, like controlling the breath could potentially prevent us from, outbursting, or
I think that's 100% real and true, that your breathing has an effect on your central nervous system. You take
right.
shallow breaths, you're more prone to anxiety.
And I just want to clarify something here, because the breath is being used both as like when you meditate, like is used both as a way to control attention, but I'm talking about as a physical, not necessarily panacea, but like as a physical way to help your body, right? I mean, to oxygenate it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we need oxygen, and like however deep or shallow our breaths are, however we regulate our breaths has a profound effect on our central nervous system and our life experience. I mean, there's an app that I use called Breathwork, and like it has sleep breaths. I mean, there's a lot of like people out there teaching breathing techniques. Dylan Wiseman got certified as like a somebody that can teach other people breath work, and it's
the
anybody. Yeah, Wim Hof has the Wim Hof method. I mean, it's like anybody that has experienced breathing techniques, like it's a tangible experience. Like something happens and you can feel it. And I'm not sure about the data, the science, the research, or placebo effect. I don't know, but all I know is that like when I use breath work, it works. Like it helps my central nervous system. So it is actively a tool, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of studies that have been done. I mean, oxygen is very helpful, and it's not surprising.
Of course, yeah.
So, would you say that meditation and all of these practices are universally beneficial?
Oh man, you sneak that universally in there, right?
I have to go there.
I don't know. I have no idea. I can't. Again, I can't say one way or the other. I would say that like majority, yes, beneficial. However, maybe there's something that has a low level of awareness, and it's better off not increasing its awareness to its existence.
Yeah, it's difficult. But to be fair, though, like I mean, oxygen is such an integral. I mean, breathing, I should say, but breathing is such an integral part of ourselves that, at the very least, meditation can't hurt, right? I mean, just like trying it, sitting there and trying it. I mean, breathing and then paying attention to the breath.
Yeah, like it's. I think meditation is different than just breathing, because the breath is just an anchor.
Right.
It's a focus point.
Correct.
Because it happens again and again and again and again, right? Like we have to breathe. I'm breathing right now. So it's something to focus on that happens again and again and again. And I think that like there are other focus points and anchors that people do use. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Breath is just like the easiest anchor. But in the other, the breath work example, that is specific to your central nervous system and oxygenating your body, and how that specific breathing routine affects your body and your central nervous system.
Very good. Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that. And so another question that I had, I always had that question. Since consciousness and awareness is something deeply personal, and there's people who can be like very artistic about the way that they express it, do you think that there is other ways to communicate it to other people beyond, a rationality, or beyond logical explanation, or are there alternative ways to communicate between individuals?
Well, I'll start by asking you, do you have anything at the top of your head?
Right. I mean, my sister, she, she often tells me that, like she doesn't, understand logic. Like she sometimes like understand colors, understands emotions. So she responds better to, and this is something that I personally don't understand. at all. I mean, I can see, like, I can, when it comes to communicating information is very difficult unless I'm just trying to understand how the other person feels. Like as a poker player, I've trained myself to some extent. But like, is there any, I'm very interested because a lot of people, when they talk about spirituality, they talk in a language which is at least foreign to me. Like it feels, they're talking in colors, or like they have these descriptions which can be very foreign about, for
Well,
example,
just here, Duncan.
one specific example, and sorry to interrupt, but like
No, I'm
Eckhart.
interrupting you. You don't
No,
have
no,
to.
no, 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 no. It's just I really want to hear your thought on that. But it just dawned on
Well,
me. But Eckhart Tolle, when he talks about, the idea of, hyper
just
awareness.
take a moment right here, right? I'm going to interrupt you purposefully, right?
I know I'm almost done because it's sort of
No, no,
like,
no. It's
okay, go
important.
ahead,
No, it's important.
go ahead.
Like,
I won't forget.
just close your eyes
Mm-hmm.
and take a breath, and like bring awareness to how you feel about this question that you're passionate about this understanding that you're seeking, right?
Right. So my question was a little bit different than that. Like, so the this is yeah. So you're basically creating, by this example, which actually makes perfect sense to me, right? I mean, you're creating a physical state which I can relate to, right? I mean, you're giving me something tangible, right? Which I can do, and
it's not
I
a
totally,
color, right?
it's
It's
not a color,
tangible.
absolutely.
That to me is spirituality. Your spirit is singing right now. You're excited. You want to ask these questions. You want to dive into it. That to me is like the essence of it.
Absolutely. And so the example that I wanted to give earlier, I think it's relevant because it illustrates what I was going with earlier. The idea that, for example, Eckhart Tolle in his book, he talks about, there is a situation where you're aware when the colors around you start to become more vibrant. So this is the type of language which I have some trouble with, right? I mean, it's the type of language which I understand what he means, but what does he really mean, right? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. You're more aware, but what does more vibrant mean? Like language which is getting a little bit on the emotional side. And how do I know that it's not an illusion? And how do I not know that, like my brain is playing tricks on me?
Does it matter if the brain is playing a trick on you or if it's illusory?
I would say it depends on the situation. If I'm trying to cure cancer, then yes. But if I'm like, no, because there's people who actually, no, I mean,
sure.
the people are doing this. So, and I'm concerned about some of these things because they can actually go to an extreme level. And obviously what you're saying here to me makes perfect sense. I mean, we're really talking about awareness and consciousness, which are things that even though we don't understand very well, we all sort of like feel them, that they exist. But the question that I'm asking is, like when this language becomes, are there alternative ways, like beyond, what we use for day-to-day communication?
I mean, I can just give anecdotal stories about my own life, right?
Please.
I've noticed that sometimes when I'm driving in the car, I want to turn the music up really loud and sing songs. And I've recognized that's I feel it in my awareness that I'm happy, that I'm joyful, and it manifests in me singing out loud, right? And I'm very aware now that, like, oh wow, I'm in a great mood. Like I'm gonna turn this up, and this makes me happy, and makes my spirit happy. And so, like, to me, that's like, it's not colors becoming more vibrant, but it's just specific stimuli that is more meaningful, that's more impactful to my consciousness in that moment.
To me, that makes perfect sense. I mean, this is like, because again, it comes down to something that works for you, and conversely for somebody else it could be the birds chirping, or it could be, like having a lot of oxygen, or the sunlight in the morning, or whatever it is that make people, I could definitely,
whatever it is that resonates with their own specific spirit.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to, like, to a conclusion, to send it home. What are some things people can do to increase their awareness and to help them experiment to find what is it that works that works for them, and potentially possibly apply it to their game so that they can, be more aware of all the difficult
Yeah.
things.
I mean, Waking Up with Sam Harris is the app. Like I use the app on a regular basis. If we do meditation in Wolf group coaching, we use Waking Up with Sam Harris. We actually use that quite often.
We're not affiliated, by the way, but we both like Sam Harris, so that's
No,
true.
I
Yeah,
mean
yeah, it's great. Yeah,
anything that makes a profound impact on my life.
yeah.
Breathwork app on my phone. Again, just that's what I use on a regular basis. Yeah, I think those are the main tools. What was the second half of your question?
So how can that potentially uh, be applied to poker? I know we said a lot of things which go beyond, but everything philosophical has some application to poker. So how can people use awareness to potentially reduce some of the licks they have and improve as poker players in general?
So I've been thinking of this concept a lot lately because I see it happen again and again. And poker's a mathematical game. It's rooted in math, and all questions can be brought back into the math of the situation. What I hear very often is narrative stories, just describing hands and actions. And to me, narrative stories are generally driven by emotion and projection.
Mm-hmm.
And narrative stories create inconsistency in decision making because they're based on some interpretation, some story you're telling yourself, and the emotions that you're feeling in your body. Whereas I think that poker should be thought of in data points and math, and that's how you create consistent decisions again and again and again and again. If you're making decisions based on how you feel or some story you're telling yourself, you're not going to be consistent. And if you're inconsistent playing poker, you're not going to make money. And that to me is just like very cut and dry.
Right, and you're talking to a mathematician, so I can certainly relate to what you're saying. But let me ask you this: isn't emotion also part of the data points? And I'm talking about external emotion, and sometimes internal emotion
External?
too. Yeah, like for example, you're sitting at the table, and a person is steaming, right? So that is an emotional response to
I
a
would try to
stimuli.
quantify that as
Right.
a data point and see how it affects my strategy. And
Right.
then
That's what I was asking. Like, is
yeah,
an
I would try to
emotion also
put
a
a
data point?
value. Yeah,
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
data point and I would
Right.
put a value on it, but I
Right.
would try to quantify whatever that means and
Right.
mathematically assign it something so that I could use that to alter my strat. Or actually, it's not even altering; it's just an adjustment based on an extra data point.
Absolutely. And aren't also like our own emotions part like data points as well, potentially?
They can be.
Yeah,
They
they can
can
be.
certainly be data points. And we talked about intuition before. Like to me, there's a difference between like, well, I guess that's hard for me to say. Emotion is kind of intuition. It's a sensor in you that's lighting up and indicating something
Mm-hmm.
that you're interpreting consciously.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the gut or intuition or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I think that like being aware when that emotion is giving you inputs that are valuable versus when they're you're they're influenced by something not valuable is another way that awareness can help you. For instance, like you're afraid,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you're afraid and you're unaware that you're afraid, what generally is going to happen is you're going to be more risk averse and you're going to look for a reason to fold or not bet. You're going to look for a reason to take an inconsistent action. Whereas if your intuition is telling you not to bet because you think this player has a very strong hand, and you're able to trust that, then checking makes a lot more sense because it's based on data points that your subconscious brain is processing and then being relayed to you via internal sensors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's not about, that's why I wanted to flesh out that point,
Yeah,
because it's not about ignoring the emotions. It's about, treating them
using
as
them.
using them as data points and
Yeah,
being able to. And so I guess one last thing, um, because again, we're talking about awareness, and one thing that people have trouble with, and this is something that Tommy Angelo talks a lot a lot, and that's why people like Tommy Angelo, because he's a go-to person. This is emotional control, right? I mean, a lot of people have issues with emotional control in certain situations, and how can awareness be helpful in that regard? I think you and I very much agree that when it comes down to the mathematical things, you do your math right, wrong, you improve that. But when
I would
there's like,
throw out the word control, and
okay,
I would throw out the word control completely and accept that we're not in control of. We're emotional creatures with cognition. We're not cognitive creatures with emotion, is how I feel. And so controlling is futile. It's rather accepting them, having awareness of what's going on, and using that awareness to make a more informed decision while you're playing poker.
Let me change the word. Let me call it emotional response as opposed to like emotional ignorance. Like, how should people respond to these emotions, provided that they have that awareness? So
I mean,
forget about the word control. Like, let's
yeah.
like,
I mean, a lot of it boils down to training, right? Like if you know, if you are in a situation where you have principles that lead you to making whatever decision that it is, and you know in your heart, I guess that's another emotional thing. You know with a high degree of certainty that you're supposed to jam on the river here with a bluff, right? And then you feel fear about jamming. And through that fear, you start constructing a narrative as to why you feel that fear. We're trying to make sense. Like we're trying to make sense of why we feel this fear. And so then what happens is we say, oh, maybe if I had a club here, it would be a better bluff. Maybe my cards aren't good enough to bluff here. Like, and basically that is, you're trying to make sense of why you feel the fear so that you don't jam all in. But the reality is you're just afraid to jam all in because you don't want to lose a stack.
Right.
Risk aversion is in play.
Which is something you may or may not be aware, right? I mean, that fear may be something that you've been missing while you're trying to rationalize this whole thing, right? I mean, when you try to make a decision. So
to me, like when what I know I'm supposed to do is totally different than what I think I should do or how I feel like about making a specific decision.
How do you marry the two? That's the crux. Like, you on the one hand, you know what you're supposed to do, but you want to do another thing. And this is where a lot of conflict, like this is a question that my students ask me all the time, right? That's why, so I mean, I have my thoughts too, but I'm just curious as to what you think.
No, I think that whatever's rooted in principle that I can prove and that I know, I tend to go towards that direction. Unless I can rationalize a specific data point that might shift the decision.
Very good.
It has to be very tangible. Like it can't just be ethereal.
I think that's actually very good advice. And for those who don't have your experience, right? I mean, for those who haven't reached that point where, sitting at the table and they'll say, you know what, I need to go where the data points are taking me. Those who still have that conflict, how do they resolve that conflict? I think that's an important question as a takeaway.
Yeah. Get better at poker. I mean, study more, learn more about the spots, understand, have a plan that you can execute.
Let me translate that a little bit because I think it's a good advice, right? I mean, so I think again, what Brad is trying to say here is you by being aware of that conflict. First of all, there's a lot of people who are not aware of that conflict. So I think step one would be just sit at the poker table and notice those moments. That's not easy. Like if you don't have experience with that game, like sit at the poker table and, when you do one thing, but then you say in the back of your head, but I knew I shouldn't have done this. Pay attention to that moment. Write it on your cell phone. Like do something about this. Like pay attention, be aware of that. Say, oh, I realize that I have cognitive dissonance here. I think that's what, I'm paraphrasing Brad, get better. That's what getting better at poker is.
Well,
identifying
I would
those moments.
Identify that and then ask a very simple question. Like, is it
afterwards? Yes.
Like,
that's
is it
two.
true? Is it true that I knew what to do?
Right.
Or am I just biased based on the result of the hand?
Correct. That's
step
number
honest
2.
with yourself, right? Like, because again, like if you're consistent, you have something to work from. Like
Correct.
you have something to adjust from. You have a target. Like that's what consistency creates. It creates a target, a baseline that you can adjust over time as you're trying to figure out which way you need to go. But if you're just all over the place and very inconsistent, well, we don't know what you need to adjust from because you have no baseline. You're all over the map. You're just, clicking buttons, as they say.
That's exactly right. Just concentrate on doing, not concentrate on doing it right. Just concentrate on doing it first, because by taking action, you can actually adjust it later, right? I mean, you can figure out what it is.
And be consistent about the action that you take, because like that's how you learn. That's how you grow. That you create targets that you're consistent, and you're like, oh, wow, I'm very consistent about this spot and I'm torching money. So how am I torching money? In which direction do I need to go? And then you make a plan, and then you stay consistent to that plan, and then you look at the results, and you just keep adjusting.
So to put it, like as a step guide, for those who are asking the question, step one, do something, consistently, like in a specific way.
Mm-hmm.
Step number two, be aware of all the issues that arise, like whether or not it's a bad call you keep making, or whether it's a bad bet you keep making, or whatever it is. So be aware of that. Step three, I mean, when I say be aware, comes together with also being honest about it. And step three, take action. Take action, meaning try to actively, switch it. So you keep switching your consistency. So, but it does start with, that awareness. I mean, awareness is very, very crucial there.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of close out, I mentioned what you asked a question before, and I forgot one counterintuitive piece of advice for increasing awareness. Recently read a book about ADHD, and there's a lot of studies out there. You can Google it about improving your balance and it affecting your focus and improving your ability to focus. So standing on one foot with your eyes open for 30 seconds, standing on another foot with your eyes open for 30 seconds, closing your eyes, putting an object in front of you, standing on one foot, bending down. Balance and focus are apparently rooted in the cerebellum, and that's the part of the brain that you're strengthening. And so that's another just way to, in my opinion, increase your awareness, increase your focus. That's counterintuitive.
Yeah, this is great. And anything else we didn't touch about spirituality in general, about meditation, about
I'm sure a billion things we didn't touch. This is a very expansive topic, and one that I've invested a lot of energy in thinking about and trying to make sense of myself.
Oh, serious question, Brad. Is spirituality a mirage? I
don't know. I don't know.
I had to. It was mandatory.
I'm perfectly happy with saying that I don't know to many things about this life, and I'm kind of happy that the mysteries exist, because to me that's what makes life kind of fun.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And for the record, that's what meta humility is, right? We don't know anything. We just agree on that. We have no idea what's going on in this world. So then we start, digging in, right? I mean, we experiment. We take this position, we take this other position. We're super confident, but not meta confident, right? I mean, that's the difference. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do anything. If we constantly say, I don't know, we'll never go anywhere. So in the back of our heads, we know nothing. We agree to that. We're idiots, all of us, and then we're just trying to figure out, how to deal with our idiocy. I think that's a very important approach to life. So,
absolutely.
Where can people find us? And so they can rant a little bit with us.
Yeah. Greatnessvillage.com, at CBG Podcast on Twitter, and then Duncan's YouTube channel, Why Alex Beats Bobby, BOBBIE. There you go. That's it. Those are the places. Come say hi.
Absolutely. Come say hi and comment on Brad's on Doug's tank top. So.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
All right.
All right, good sir. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yes, sir. Peace out.
All right.